Karl, Bob Lazari, and Tony D'Angelo here in Eastern Connecticut. Thanks for coming on.
Good evening, Karl.
My pleasure, Bob. Tony.
Karl, first and foremost, let me tell you, our studio coordinator, Scott Hill here, is a huge Denver fan, and he told me he actually started getting into football when you were playing in Denver. And you and I happened to be born in the same year, so I was following your career very closely. And Tony remembers you well.
Yes, I do.
And again, we only have fond memories. And again, it's an honor to have you on here tonight. We just want to make that first and foremost clear to you.
Most clear.
And we appreciate your generosity, Karl.
No problem. I played 12 years in the NFL and never lost to the New England Patriots, so I don't get too many calls from back there.
We are in the middle of Patriot country here, but let me give a little background for our fans, Tony, about Karl. Again, he was played 12 years with the same team, the Denver Broncos. Was drafted in the 12th round, 310th overall in the '83 draft. Again, was a walk-on, had played at Augustana College, transferred to Minnesota, and again played for Dan Reeves from '83 to '92. Also played for Wade Phillips, '93 and '94. And Karl, my first question, I guess, when you came out of Minnesota back in '83, there, I was just wondering. I'd done some research, and I guess you had called yourself overconfident and foolish at the time, but you knew you could play. My question, I guess, is was Dan Reeves the ideal coach for you to start under?
He really was in a lot of ways. I was not the prototypical height, weight, 40-time guy. I had a lot of skills that were outside of the standard realm. I was picked 20 guys away from Mr. Irrelevant. But that same year they had drafted Chris Hinton in the first round and ended up trading Hinton for Elway. But they had drafted Chris Hinton out of Northwestern, and playing at Minnesota, we played against them. And I had a very good game against him, got a couple sacks, and pretty much handled them all game. And I guess their thinking was, if we're going to pick this guy first, maybe we should pick this other guy who handled him 12th. So it worked out okay for me. Dan was always a guy who would give you a shot if he thought you could play. If you were the underdog and were an effort guy, he'd give you a chance, and that's all I needed, was just a foot in the door.
I must tell our fans out there, Tony, that Karl in his career, 79 sacks. He had 100-plus tackles, 5 straight seasons. Played in 180 games. Again,
and played every defensive position except for the backside.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. First of all, he was a 6-time Pro Bowl selection. But as far as you were often referred to, and I can back it up, Karl, the NFL's most versatile player maybe ever, when you think about having played 7 different positions except in the secondary. Did you enjoy, Karl, not having a set position? I mean, you were actually the NFL's first quote-unquote free lineman, if that's a term I can use. Did you like roaming around like that?
I thought it was a great situation, and you've got to have the right team to do that, because you have to realize every time I moved, that meant somebody else had to move. So you had to have all 7 guys up front know at least 2 positions. And to get guys to even learn one position in the NFL is a challenge sometimes. We had a very bright group, and the guys were able to make adjustments and move around. And Joe Collier, our defensive coordinator at the time, was an amazing coach. A lot of the things they're doing now were things that Joe came up with. We were playing man in the zone. We were dropping linemen out. We were doing all kinds of crazy stuff that back in the day that everyone looked at as crazy stuff. Now it's kind of the standard. You're going to see it on Super Bowl Sunday. That's what Pittsburgh does. So we were able to do all kinds of things as a team, and Joe was able to take advantage of my versatility. I was drafted as a nose guard, played defensive end, moved me to stand-up linebacker, middle linebacker, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, and moving around like that. And oftentimes, in a single game, I'd play all 7 front positions, and he would use my versatility to get matchup problems for the other team and make them plan and go through all kinds of gyrations during the week to have to game plan for us. So if he got me matched up on a tight end or on a running back in a pass rush situation, we were set.
And it always occurred to me back in the day, Tony, that Denver wasn't the biggest squad out there.
Yes.
It was more of a cerebral team, and obviously under Collier, they proved that to be the case. Question, Tony.
And Karl, as far as first of all, good evening, great to have you. When you came over to the pro game from the college game, what was the biggest kind of culture shock you had coming over as a young man?
Well, I felt like I could play. That wasn't really an issue. I never had played special teams before, and that's really, I made the team on special teams and as a third down pass rusher. And first kickoff, first game I actually ever went to was one I played in, and we're playing at Three Rivers Stadium there in Pittsburgh, and I'm covering a kickoff for, the opening kickoff of the game. Never run. They had fired the guy the week before who was on the kickoff team, so they put me on the kickoff team. I didn't even do it in preseason. And I'm running down, and I made the cardinal error of looking up at the ball, and right then this little running back hit me under the chin, and the first thing to hit was the back of my head on the turf. So you learn really quickly not to make those kind of mistakes in the NFL, because someone will make you pay. But I enjoy playing special teams, and I played them for my first 3 years. I got hit in the chest on a kickoff coverage and knocked my heart out of rhythm, and coach decided he didn't want to put me on special teams anymore because I was making too many plays during the game, playing defense.
Again, you're watching Monday Night Sports Talk, January 31st edition, on the phone live with former NFL All-Pro defensive player Karl Mecklenburg. Karl, you went to 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, as we were talking before the show, Tony and I, and you lost all of them pretty badly. I was just wondering, was that ever a problem for you personally from a frustration level, or was that something that you actually could be beneficial to you when you do your motivational speaking like you do right now?
It's tough. It really is. I look back on those games and think a lot about what ifs and how comes, and I still haven't even watched the whole games. I can't bring myself to it. It was such a dream of mine to be a world champion and to work so hard and get so close 3 times, and actually played in another AFC Championship game and lost on a fumble there at the end to Buffalo. To have all those opportunities and not come through is very frustrating for me. I didn't really realize how frustrating it was to me until I did a television tryout, and they had me on camera with Mark May, and Mark started monkeying around, showing me a Super Bowl ring, and kind of teasing me about it. And man, my blood boiled. It just right there. I knew it was there, and I don't know that it's ever going to go away. That's, I think, kind of a competitor's mindset that you really want to you want to accomplish. You want to grab that brass ring. That's something you've thought about and worked at for so long.
And Karl, I know a lot of our fans, obviously you played with the great John Elway, and just a couple years after you retired, Elway goes out there and wins a Super Bowl. I just have to get your spin on him as a teammate and as a leader in general, and now we've heard that he's going to take the reins as far as in an executive position with the Broncos.
With the club,
Maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about Elway.
Yeah, John is a great guy, a team guy. A guy that doesn't want to be. He hated it when they say John Elway and the Denver Broncos. He was one of us, and he wanted it to be that way. He showed up at every single team function, and as a superstar, he didn't have to do that, but he did. And he'd lift weights with the linemen, and he'd run the sprints, and he'd do everything we all did, and wanted to do that. Wanted to be a part of the team. Wanted to be one of the guys, and that's a great piece of leadership. To me, leadership is 4 C's, the letter C. It's community, and that's what John was all about, the community of the team. He would hang out with the guys, make sure everybody knew what was important to him, and make sure that he knew what was important to them. Then it's commitment to the team mission, the team passion. It's the clarity and the consistency of that commitment, and it was very consistent with John, and there was no doubt that it was all about winning. You could tell it trickled all the way up to Mr. Bolin when they won that first championship. He held up the trophy and said, "This one's for John." That's how strong his leadership position on that team was.
Yeah, it was so long that people thought Elway could never win the
Never
big
win
one.
it. Yeah, exactly.
That was a guy that wasn't going to quit either. And as we go along, folks, we have a nice collage of pictures we'll show of Karl, old number 77. We have some nice pictures that Scott Hill put together, and we'll show those as we go along. But Karl, you played the game, and I guess you were listed at about 6'3", 240, which pretty much is the size of a small fullback these days.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Actually, that's accurate. Yeah.
But it really is amazing.
My weight limit under Dan Reeves was 238. If I weighed more than that on Friday, I'd get fined.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And these guys, today, the game, they're so much bigger, and they're fast, Karl. Does all this contribute to the ton of injuries that we're seeing these days?
You know, I think that may be part of it. The other part of it, truthfully, is that they're reported. When I was playing, you played with injury, and it was expected. I ended up with 16 football-related surgeries.
Wow.
I had postseason surgery almost every season, and that was just part of the deal. Now, with free agency, they're much more careful about how they treat the players. They want the players to be happy and it to be a positive place to be. And if you've got an injury, they're going to take care of it for you. So I think it's a positive thing for the players. I don't necessarily think there's more injuries. I just think that people are made much more aware of what's going on in the field because the guys are not playing when they're injured.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had that many surgeries. I think of multi-surgeries. I think of Mark Schlereth, who I know you're familiar with.
I lost a job to Mark. I was the poster boy for the Denver Bronco rehab centers, and as soon as Mark retired, they booted me and put him on the poster.
Knee surgery, tons of them. But again, we're talking to former All-Pro Karl Mecklenburg. Tony, question?
And Karl, as far as being a player in the Super Bowl, what is it like to be a player during the week? And also my curiosity question is, what is it like to be in the locker room being on the losing team at the end of the game?
Yeah, well, first of all, the 2 weeks is a different thing. We all had situations where we were injured or where we miss a game for one reason or another. Or later on in my career, they started the bye week thing, and so we had the bye week. But usually, you'd think it would be similar to a bye week, but you go into it and it, unlike on a bye week, they put in the game plan right away, or at least that's how Dan approached it. You put in the game plan right away, and you go over it and go over it and go over it and practice and practice and practice, and it would get to the point where you just couldn't wait for the game to happen. The first week you're dealing with trying to get tickets to all your friends and family, trying to make sure they have accommodations in the Super Bowl city, and jumping through all those hoops. Fortunately, my wife was very good about that and handled most of that for me. But I know a lot of guys were having headaches with that first week, and then the second week coming in, you kind of try to focus down and get ready for the game. You can only watch so much film. Coming in, the other team's watching you and going to change what they did because they know you're going to adjust to what they're doing, and they're going to adjust to what you're doing. So all that preparation and stuff comes down to getting out there and playing the game. Unfortunately, when we played the game in the Super Bowl, all three times we ended up losing, like you said, and losing pretty badly. And there were different reasons for each loss. It was a tough situation to deal with. You go in at halftime, you try to make adjustments. You try to figure out what's going on and how to fix that and stop the bleeding and come back out and finish up the game. You've spent so much time dreaming and thinking about the possibility of playing in the Super Bowl, and to come down to that and be way behind at halftime is a tough thing. We weren't way behind at halftime in all of them. I believe against the Giants, it was close at halftime, but it was not your typical thing either, because you spend like an hour in the locker room. It seemed like at halftime. You go in and then all the bands are playing and all the stuff's going on out the halftime show. So the timing is very different in the Super Bowl from that standpoint too. Not only the halftime, but the warm up and between every series there's a commercial break, so NFL can rake in the big money for those commercials, and just the whole timing and the noise and everything's very different in the game until you're actually on the field and you're hitting each other, and then it's right back to football.
Again, we have a couple minutes left with the great Karl Mecklenburg, and Karl, I would mention your post-playing days. First of all, Karl has a book, Tony, that he came out with, The Heart of a Student Athlete, All-Pro Advice for Competitors and Their Families. You can get more information about that at www.studentathlete.us. Karl and his wife also back in 2006, Tony, formed the Karl Mecklenburg Reach Foundation.
Yeah.
That's it's about emphasis on schools in the Denver area and graduation rates and everything like that. So Karl is a very busy guy, and he does a lot of motivational speaking. He has spoken in front of companies such as Coors, Honeywell, Progressive Insurance, etc. So if anybody, again, you can go to, I think, karlmecklenburg.net. You can get more information about the Reach Foundation. I wanted to definitely mention that because Karl's very involved with a lot of stuff like that right now. But and I know, Karl, we wanted to talk, Tony and I had mentioned beforehand, you were very, very close to the Columbine situation. You live right out there in that Littleton, Colorado area. And I know you've probably talked to a lot of the high school kids, and I heard in one interview you called those kids just as tough as some of the NFL players that you came across. But how is the overall mood out there now, and is this something that you're doing on a continual basis? I mean, talking to these people.
Yeah, I spent some time with the kids in the hospital. They were, over at Craig Hospital, the kids that were injured. Especially the spinal injury kids, and got to get to know them and their families. We had an opportunity to speak to the kids a year after the event happened, and so I got to talk with the kids, kind of in a speaker's capacity, and that went well. But it's amazing that the resilience of these kids. Really the parents had a lot more issues with it than the kids. The kids were, I'm injured. How do I get better? What will I be able to do? What won't I be able to do? How can we rig my truck up so I can still drive? All that kind of stuff. And not looking back and not wondering why so much as looking forward. That's one of the great things about working with young people. They're always looking forward. Oftentimes when I get hired by a corporation to come out and speak, I'll call the local colleges and high schools and try to set up some talks there too, just because I love so much dealing with young people who have their future in front of them and are thinking forward and thinking about what the possibilities are in their lives and hungry for an opportunity to excel and succeed in their lives.
And Tony, one last question. We have about a minute left.
Yeah, and Karl, probably to the moment, we have a big situation in the NFL right now in March with a possible lockout. And, you hear both sides. You hear owners complaining about players and vice versa. What are your thoughts here? Is there a right and wrong, and can this thing ever be, mended and mended well?
To me, just put the players aside. Trying to get 32 owners who are in very different financial situations and situations where they have different priorities to agree to something is really, really difficult. You've got your Rooneys who have owned the team forever, and then you've got, for example, Jimmy Johnson down there in Dallas, who's leveraged to the hilt for this giant stadium they're building down there. They obviously have different ideas and different ways they want to go, with the NFL. To me, that's the biggest challenge, trying to get those guys to agree. The players, they're going to fall in line because they've already spent their money more often than not.
Yeah.
I really think it comes down to getting pressure on the owners to get the thing going, and they don't. Historically, they haven't come to agreement until there's been some sort of work stoppage or strike, and it's unfortunate because everybody loses then. I'm hoping for the first time, something will happen and they'll be able to come to an agreement. But once again, until the owners are losing money. It just hasn't happened in the past.
That's for sure. And I can't let you go, Karl, without a quick Super Bowl prediction.
I like Pittsburgh. I think they're going to be able to run the ball and control the ball and take the ball out of Green Bay's offense's hands and control the clock. So I think that's the way it's going to work.
I agree with you. Again, Karl Mecklenburg, the 6-time Pro Bowl selection, one of the great Denver Broncos in the Ring of Fame, right, Tony?
In the Ring of Fame.
Karl, again, it's been a pleasure being in touch with you, and I want to thank you for giving us a few minutes tonight.
Thank you so much, Karl.
And the best to your family, and keep up the great work. And anybody out there who has any questions and wants to get a hold of Karl can get it through me. Karl, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Karl.
I appreciate it. They can go to karlmecklenburg.com, and there's video of me speaking there and all kinds of stuff there, too.
We'll
all
plug
right,
it.
Thanks.
I will plug it in my column also, Karl, and my best to your family.
Appreciate it. Thank
you so much,
Okay,
Karl.
take care.